The year is 322 BC. A small room overlooks the Aegean Sea, the island of Euboea, a forgotten village called Chalcis. An old man struggles to breathe. Through the window, the blue sea stretches endlessly, but his eyes see nothing. In the corner of the room, manuscripts lie scattered. Years of work, decades of thought. Dust settles over them like a burial shroud. He is sick. Stomach pains rack his body. His strength fades with each passing day. His name is Aristotle, the man who wrote the world's first encyclopedia, the man who invented logic, the man who systematized biology, politics, ethics, metaphysics. But right now, in this moment, he is nothing more than an old, sick fugitive. Why is he here? 1 year ago, something happened in Athens. His student, the man who conquered the world, Alexander the Great, died suddenly in Babylon. When the news reached Athens, the city went mad. For years, Athens had lived under Macedonian rule, and now the citizens exploded with rage. The fury turned on Aristotle. Macedonian spy. Alexander's lapdog. The foreigner who betrayed us. Rumors spread like wildfire that he had been a spy for Macedonia, that he had mocked the gods. A charge of impiety was filed. He would have to stand trial. Aristotle left. Before he fled, he told a friend, "I will not allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy." The first sin? 70 years earlier, Athens had forced Socrates to drink poison. The city that murdered a great philosopher. Aristotle would not let history repeat itself. Or perhaps, he was simply tired. He went to Chalcis, his mother's homeland, a small town by the sea. There he survived for 1 more year. And now, at the age of 62, death is coming for him. What does he think about? The hundreds of books he wrote? The thousands of students he taught? Or Athens, the city that betrayed him? Outside the window, the sea is calm. Only the sound of waves drifts into the room. His breathing grows shallow. An era is ending. But this is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. Turn back the clock, 45 years earlier. 367 BC, northern Aegean. A small colonial city called Stagira. A 17-year-old boy packs his belongings. His name is Aristotle, the son of a physician. His father, Nicomachus, was the court doctor to the Macedonian king. But his father died when the boy was young. His mother, too, passed early. Orphaned, the boy was raised by a guardian. He was bright. He loved books. He never stopped asking questions. His guardian made a decision. Send this boy to Athens. There, the world's greatest school awaited. Plato's academy. The boy boarded a ship. Days of sailing. South and further south. Finally, the port of Piraeus came into view. What did he feel? Excitement? Fear? Ambition? He didn't know. He didn't know he would spend the next 20 years here. That he would become the disciple of the world's greatest philosopher, and that one day he would surpass his master. The boy passed through Athens' gates and walked toward the academy. His steps were light. He didn't know yet. This path he was walking would become one of the most important journeys in the history of human thought. The academy lay beyond the walls of Athens. Northwest of the city, past olive groves and winding paths, white columns rose against the sky. This was Plato's school. Here, philosophers walked and talked. Here, young minds studied geometry, astronomy, and the art of debate. When 17-year-old Aristotle stepped through those gates, a man in his 60s greeted him. Plato. From the very beginning, they were different. Plato came from nobility. Born into one of Athens's most prestigious families, He grew up surrounded by wealth and privilege. His speech was elegant. His thoughts reached for the heavens. He believed in a world beyond this one, the world of forms, eternal, unchanging, perfect. Aristotle came from the frontier, a small colonial town near the Macedonian kingdom. His father had been a physician. From childhood, Aristotle grew accustomed to dissection, to observation. His eyes turned downward, to the things of this earth, to living creatures, to things that moved and changed. But for the first few years, this difference didn't matter. Aristotle studied hard. He attended Plato's lectures, read his dialogues, mastered the art of dialectic. He excelled. He understood faster than the others, asked deeper questions. Plato recognized his brilliance. The mind of the school, Plato called him. Years passed. 5 years. 10. 15. Aristotle was no longer a student. He reached his 30s. He began teaching, gave lectures on rhetoric, researched logic. He became Plato's colleague. But in that process, cracks began to form. One afternoon, the two men walked through the academy gardens. Plato pointed to the sky. "Do you see? The sun. It resembles the form of the good. It illuminates everything, yet cannot itself be seen." Aristotle's gaze dropped, his eyes fixed on the grass at their feet. "But master, we live in this world, where this grass grows, where these butterflies fly." Plato smiled. Perhaps it was a sad smile. "You're too attached to reality." This was their difference. For Plato, truth lay beyond, the unchanging, the eternal, the perfect. Everything in this world was merely shadow, like images flickering on a cave wall. For Aristotle, truth was here. This tree, this bird, this person. To observe them, classify them, understand them. That was philosophy's task. Plato was a mathematician. Aristotle was a biologist. Plato was a poet. Aristotle was a scientist. But for 20 years, they walked together. They respected each other, learned from each other. Aristotle never openly criticized his master. Plato acknowledged his students' independence. It was a beautiful tension, different, yet necessary to one another. But all things must end. 347 BC Plato died. He was 80 years old. The academy reeled in shock. For 40 years, this giant had led the school. Who would succeed him? Many thought of Aristotle. He had been there for 20 years. He was the most brilliant philosopher. Surely he should inherit the school. But it didn't happen. The successor was Speusippus, Plato's nephew, blood relation, an Athenian citizen. Aristotle was Macedonian, a foreigner. He felt betrayed. 20 years he had devoted, 20 years of teaching and research, and in the end, they treated him as an outsider. He understood Plato's philosophy more deeply than anyone, but blood mattered more than philosophy. Aristotle left. At the age of 37, he walked away from the academy, the place where he had spent 2 decades, where he had given his youth. Where did he go? East, across the Aegean to Asia Minor, to a small city called Assos. A friend had invited him. An old colleague, Hermias, now ruled there. In Assos, Aristotle opened a small school. A handful of students joined him. They continued their research. He walked the beaches, observed marine life, dissected squid, octopus, sea urchins. He was lonely. Few students, few books. Confined to a small house. He missed the academy's grand columns, its gardens, its library, the conversations with Plato. But he didn't stop, he thought. I must create my own philosophy. I must step out of my master's shadow. Not heaven, but earth. Not forms, but reality. Not abstraction, but the concrete. He was alone. But in that solitude, he was free. 3 years passed, and then one day, a letter arrived. From Macedonia. His life was about to change again. Aristotle went east, across the Aegean to Asia Minor, to a small city called Assos. An old friend awaited him there, Hermias, a former colleague from the academy, now a minor ruler. Hermias welcomed him, gave him space to open a small school. A few students gathered. But it wasn't like Athens, nothing like the academy's magnificence. Aristotle was lonely, yet there he found love. Pythias, Hermias's niece. They married. For the first time, Aristotle built a home, in his 40s, and soon after, they moved again. To the island of Lesbos, northeast Aegean, a large island of blue waters, olive trees, and quiet fishing villages. In the small village of Pyra on Lesbos, there lived a strange man. Every morning at sunrise, he went to the mudflats. Sleeves rolled up, he waded through the shallows. Knee-deep in water, he sifted through rocks and tide pools, collecting things: sea urchins, sea squirts, small crabs, sea cucumbers. Fishermen watched him. What is that man doing? A philosopher, they say, from Athens. Why is a philosopher sniffing dead fish? They laughed. They didn't understand. Wasn't philosophy supposed to be lofty? Gazing at stars, contemplating the gods. But Aristotle looked down, at the earth, at the sea, at living things. He returned home and placed his specimens on a work table, picked up a sharp knife, carefully opened their bodies. He examined the innards of a squid. Where was the ink sac? What did the brain look like? How many arms? How did the suckers attach? He recorded everything. Pythias watched from beside him. You seem happy. Aristotle looked up. Squid entrails covered his hands. He smiled. For the first time, I am free. No shadow of Plato, no politics of the academy. Here, there was only the sea. Living creatures. Questions. He dissected something different every day. One day, an octopus. He discovered 3 hearts. Astonishing. Why 3? What purpose did they serve? One day, a shark. A fisherman had caught it. He cut open its belly. Inside, he found baby sharks, fully formed, tiny but complete. He realized, this creature doesn't lay eggs. It gives live birth. Not a fish. One day, he observed a dolphin, washed ashore. He approached cautiously. It breathed. With lungs. No gills. He recorded his observation. The dolphin is not a fish. It is a mammal. 2,000 years later, scientists would read his notes in amazement. How did he know? He observed birds, incubated eggs. Each day, he cracked one open and looked inside. Day 3, Day 5, Day 7. Watching life form. The heart came first. It began to beat. He observed bees, sat beside hives for hours, watched the workers dance, the queen's role, their society. He recorded it. Bees have a ruler. They follow order. The villagers still shook their heads. A philosopher staring at beehives. But Aristotle didn't care. He saw truth, the cosmic order hidden in small things. Every living creature had purpose. The acorn exists to become an oak. The caterpillar exists to become a butterfly. The child exists to become an adult. He observed over 500 species, 117 types of fish, 140 birds, 60 mammals. He classified them. Those with blood and those without. Egg layers and live birthers. Lung breathers and gill breathers. He was the first biologist. At night, he wrote, Historia Animalium, on the parts of animals, on the generation of animals. Page after page on papyrus, filled with observations. Pythias watched over him. A child was born, a daughter. They named her Pythias. Aristotle was happy. He had family, research, freedom. The sun on Lesbos was warm, the sea was calm. He wanted to stay here forever. But history was calling. Spring, 343 BC. A letter arrived from Philip II, King of Macedonia. Aristotle unfolded it. The king's words were brief. Teach my son. I need the best tutor in Greece. Aristotle hesitated. Macedonia was distant, a mountainous kingdom to the north. The Greeks considered it half barbarian, their accents crude, their culture backward. But Philip was powerful. His army threatened all of Greece, and Philip knew Aristotle's father. Years ago, Nicomachus had served as the royal physician to the Macedonian court. The connection existed. Aristotle looked at Pythias. I think I must go. She nodded. They packed, left the peace of Lesbos behind, headed north. Pella was not like Athens. The palace was grand but rough, soldiers everywhere. The clash of swords echoed, hoofbeats thundered. This was a nation of warriors. Philip greeted him, a tall, imposing man. A scar crossed one eye, a battle wound. Welcome, Aristotle. I entrust my son to you. What kind of boy is he? Philip paused. You'll see. The next day, Aristotle traveled to the Nymphaeum of Myetza, a quiet sanctuary in the forest, not far from Pella. This would be the classroom. And there he met Alexander, a 13-year-old boy, small in stature, blonde hair. But his eyes were different, the eyes of a lion. Untamed, burning with ambition, confidence, madness. Aristotle saw those eyes and knew. This boy is not ordinary, dangerous, but also great. Alexander spoke first. You are Plato's student? I am. Plato taught a philosophy for the weak, ideals, justice, goodness, but the world is ruled by strength. Aristotle smiled, a fearless boy. So what do you want? To conquer the world, like Achilles. Then first, you must read Homer. For 3 years, they met every day. In the mornings, lessons at the Nymphaeum. Aristotle taught Homer's Iliad. Alexander read with passion. The rage of Achilles, the courage of Hector, the glory of heroes. This is who I want to be, a legend. Aristotle replied calmly. Achilles died young. He gained glory, but lost his life. Alexander shrugged. A short, brilliant life is better than a long, meaningless one. In the afternoons, Aristotle taught medicine, biology, politics, ethics. One day, he showed Alexander a dissected animal. Look, this is the heart, the center of all life. Alexander peered with interest. Is it the same in humans? Yes, kings, slaves, Greeks, Persians, all have the same heart. Alexander narrowed his eyes. But their souls are different. Are they? Or do we simply want to believe that? They argued often. One day, Alexander boasted proudly, I tamed Bucephalus. It was a famous story. A wild horse no one could tame. A 13-year-old boy succeeded. How? He realized the horse feared its own shadow. He turned it toward the sun. I will conquer the world with strength, like Bucephalus, Aristotle answered quietly. If you cannot conquer yourself first, you cannot conquer the world. The horse feared its shadow. What do you fear? Alexander didn't answer. But Aristotle knew what this boy feared. Mediocrity, being forgotten, living in his father's shadow. Aristotle gave Alexander a gift, a manuscript of the Iliad. Alexander kept it under his pillow for the rest of his life. 340 BC. The lessons ended. Alexander turned 16. Time to join his father on the battlefield, to fight. On their last day, the two men stood before the Nymphaeum. Teacher, thank you. What did you learn? Alexander thought for a moment. That the world is vast, and that I can conquer it. Aristotle smiled sadly. I had hoped you would learn humility. Humility is a virtue for the weak. No, humility is the virtue of the truly strong. They embraced. Would they meet again? No one knew. 2 years later, Philip II was assassinated, stabbed at a wedding feast. 20-year-old Alexander ascended the throne, and he marched east, leading his army, to conquer Persia, to reach the ends of the earth. He carried a sword. Aristotle remained. He too had a world to conquer, the world of ignorance, the world of the unknown. He carried a pen. 335 BC, Aristotle made his decision. Return to Athens. 13 years had passed, since Plato's death, since his exile. But now, things were different. He was Alexander's teacher, the tutor of the world conqueror. That fame would protect him. He packed his belongings, manuscripts from Lesbos, observation notes, specimens. Pythias had already passed away, young, from illness. He traveled south with his young daughter. Alexander went east. Aristotle went south. One man would conquer the world with a sword. The other would conquer it with knowledge. Two empires were beginning. One would be written in blood, the other in ink. One would collapse in 10 years. The other would survive for 2,000. 335 BC, Aristotle returned to Athens. He was 50 years old. 13 years had passed. When he left, he fled like an exile. Now he returned differently, as the teacher of Alexander the Great, the tutor of the world conqueror. Athens received him, or rather, it had no choice. Macedonian armies controlled Greece. Alexander's name inspired fear, respect, awe. Aristotle established himself at the Lyceum, east of Athens, beyond the city walls, near the temple of Apollo Lycaos, a place with wide gardens, walking paths, dense groves of trees. He founded a school, but this was an ordinary school. This was an empire of knowledge, humanity's first research institute. Walk through the gardens of the Lyceum. Past the entrance, a massive library stands. Thousands of papyrus scrolls line the shelves. Homer, Hesiod, Heraclitus, Plato's dialogues, and Aristotle's own manuscripts. Beside the library, a specimen room. Inside, marvels. Elephant tusks from India, a lion's skull from Africa, strange plants from Persia, coral from the Red Sea, papyrus from Egypt. Where did these come from? Alexander sent them. As he marched eastward, the conqueror never forgot his teacher. He commanded his army. When you discover new animals, preserve specimens and send them to Athens. When you find unfamiliar plants, collect seeds and send them. He sent astronomical sums of money, research funding. Aristotle was moved. The world came to him. Without leaving Athens, he could study animals from India, observe plants from Persia. Step into the gardens. Exotic plants grow everywhere. Persian roses, Indian spices, Babylonian palms. Gardeners tend them carefully. This was a botanical garden, the world's first. A small pond. Fish swim in it. Species Aristotle brought from Lesbos. He observes them with his students, how they reproduce, what they eat. Follow the walking paths. People appear. Aristotle and his students walk and talk. This was his teaching method. He didn't lecture sitting down. He taught while walking. Pacing the paths, they questioned, answered, debated. Master, what is happiness? What do you think it is? Is it pleasure? Then pigs would be the happiest creatures. The students laugh. Then is it wisdom? You're getting closer. Happiness is the realization of excellence, the perfect exercise of human function. They keep walking. 1 hour. 2. Until their legs ache. That's why people called this school the peripatetic school. The peripatoi. The walkers. In the evenings, Aristotle retreated to his study alone. A small room, a desk, a chair, a lamp, mountains of papyrus, a pen soaking in ink. He sat, picked up the pen, and wrote. Aristotle was obsessed with knowledge. He wanted to write everything humanity could know, the workings of the universe, the secrets of life, the laws of human society, the way to live rightly. He slept less, 4 hours a night. The rest of the time he researched, taught, wrote. He wrote logic, the organon, how humans should think, syllogisms, premises and conclusions, validity and soundness. For 2,000 years, this would be humanity's tool for reasoning. He wrote natural philosophy, physics, on the heavens, on generation and corruption. How does the universe work? 4 elements: earth, water, air, fire. A 5th element, ether. Celestial bodies move eternally in circles. He wrote biology, Historia Animalium, on the parts of animals, on the motion of animals, on the generation of animals. Everything he observed on Lesbos, over 500 species, their structures, functions, purposes. He wrote metaphysics. Metaphysics. What is being? What is substance? 4 causes. Material, formal, efficient, final. The unmoved mover. That which moves all things, but is itself unmoved. He wrote ethics. Nicomachean ethics, named for his son, or his father. Nicomachus was his son's name, but also his father's. What is happiness? What is virtue? The golden mean. Every virtue is balance between extremes. He wrote politics. Politics. He collected the constitutions of 158 city-states, compared them, analyzed them. What is the best government? Democracy has strengths and weaknesses. Oligarchy has strengths and weaknesses. A mixed constitution is most stable. He wrote rhetoric, poetics, economics, meteorology. In 12 years, he wrote over 150 books. How was this possible? He wasn't alone. The Lyceum was a community. Students gathered data, observed, recorded. Theophrastus researched plants. Eudemus researched mathematics. They all stood on the shoulders of a giant. But Aristotle created the system. He wove everything together. He was tired, growing old. His hair turned gray. His eyes dimmed. His fingers stiffened. Stomach problems plagued him. But he didn't stop. This was his mission, the legacy he must leave humanity. Under lamplight, he kept writing, deep into the night, until dawn. Summer, 323 BC news arrived. Alexander was dead, in Babylon, at the age of 32. Suddenly. At first, no one believed it. A rumor. A lie. Alexander was immortal, the man who conquered Persia, Egypt, who reached India, who claimed to be the son of a god. But the rumor was true. A fever, they said. No. Poison. No one knew for certain. But the result was clear. The world conqueror was dead. Athens erupted. That night, people poured into the streets, torches blazing, wine flowing, dancing, celebrating. Freedom! The Macedonian yoke is broken. Athens, rise again! It was madness. Suppressed rage exploded. For 10 years, Athens had lived under Macedonian rule. The proud democracy humiliated. And now, the tyrant was dead. The Macedonian garrison was attacked. Pro-Macedonian politicians were hunted. Some were killed. And the fury turned toward the Lyceum. At first, rumors. Aristotle is a Macedonian spy. He sold information to Alexander. Do you know how much money he received? The rumors grew. They weren't true. But to an angry mob, truth didn't matter. Stones flew. One evening, a window at the Lyceum shattered. A rock crashed through. A note was tied to it. Foreigner, leave. Students grew afraid. On the streets, citizens stared at them, with hostile eyes. Someone spat. Macedonian dogs. Aristotle stopped going out, stayed within the Lyceum walls. But from beyond the walls, he heard them. Shouts, threats. Remember Socrates. You'll be the second Socrates. Socrates. 70 years ago, Athens executed the philosopher. For impiety. For corrupting the youth. Aristotle knew. The same fate awaited him. And finally, charges were filed. Impiety. The specific accusation was absurd. Aristotle had written a hymn for his dead friend, Hermias. A song that should only be offered to the gods. Blasphemy. But the real reason was obvious. His connection to Macedonia. His status as a foreigner. Fall 322 BC. Aristotle made his decision. He must leave. That night, he sat alone in his study. A 62-year-old man. His hands trembled. Illness tormented him. His stomach burned. His body felt heavy. Breathing was difficult. He looked around. Manuscripts piled on his desk. Unfinished works. Things needing revision. A map hung on the wall. The world map. The world Alexander had expanded. Shelves held specimens. Seashells, bird skulls, dried plants. 12 years. The brightest time of his life. The most productive. And now he had to abandon it all. With trembling hands he packed. Only a few books, the most important manuscripts. The rest he entrusted to his student Theophrastus. You will continue the Lyceum, the research. Theophrastus wept. Master, I'll come with you. No, you must stay. Someone must keep this flame alive. Other students gathered. They wept too. Master, fight. We'll testify. Defend you in court. Aristotle shook his head. Socrates fought. He defended himself. But in the end, he drank the hemlock. I will not allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy. It was a lie. The truth was simpler. He was exhausted. He had no strength to fight. 20 years under Plato. 13 years wandering. 12 years at the Lyceum. 45 years. Now, he wanted rest. Night fell. Athens' lights flickered in the darkness. Somewhere, a drunk man shouted. Aristotle walked through the Lyceum gardens one last time. The paths, the pond, the botanical garden, the library, the things he built, the things he loved. Now, farewell. He walked out the door, a small cart, a few books, alone. He headed north, to Chalcis, his mother's homeland. He didn't look back. If he did, he would cry. Athens' gates faded into the distance. The Lyceum's trees disappeared into darkness. A great philosopher became a fugitive. The man who built an empire of knowledge became a criminal fleeing in the night. He arrived in Chalcis, rented a small house, a room overlooking the sea, and 1 year later, there he would die. Alone. In sorrow. But his books remained. At the Lyceum, in Theophrastus's hands. They would survive. No, they would be reborn. This looked like an ending, but it was truly a beginning. The greatest story was just about to start. Aristotle died, 322 BC. In a small room in Chalcis, at the age of 62, a fugitive, a foreigner. His body returned to the earth. The funeral was modest. No grand eulogies. No magnificent tomb. For a man who once moved the world, the end was too humble. But his books remained. At the Lyceum, Theophrastus preserved them. The disciple guarded his master's legacy. For 30 years he led the school. And then he too grew old. Before his death, he passed the manuscripts to another student. Years passed. The Lyceum declined. The Macedonian Empire crumbled. Alexander's generals divided the empire among themselves. They warred with each other. Blood spilled. Cities burned. Libraries were plundered. And Aristotle's books disappeared. 3rd century BC. A small town in Asia Minor. Skepsis. In someone's cellar, wooden crates lay stacked. Dust settled. Spiderwebs formed. Mold grew. Inside the crates, papyrus scrolls. Hundreds of manuscripts. Aristotle's manuscripts. How did they end up here? A complicated story. Theophrastus's student took them. When he died, his heirs inherited them. But they weren't philosophers. To them, these were just old papers. So they buried them in the cellar. For 200 years. For 2 centuries, humanity's intellectual treasure rotted in a damp basement. Metaphysics, ethics, biology, logic. Everything nearly lost. It was ironic. Alexander, who conquered the world, became a legend instantly. Everyone remembered his name. But Aristotle, who sought to understand the world, was being forgotten. Power was brilliant, but brief. Knowledge was humble, but enduring. Yet history took an unexpected turn. 1st century, BC. A collector visited Skepsis. He'd heard rumors. Somewhere, ancient philosophical manuscripts lay hidden. He found the cellar, opened the crates. The papyrus was damaged, water-stained, insect-eaten. Text faded, but readable. He bought the manuscripts, paid a fortune, brought them to Athens. Scholars gathered, began restoring the manuscripts, organizing them, editing them. Aristotle began to rise again. Rome conquered the world. Roman swords were mighty, but Roman philosophy was weak. They invited Greek philosophers as teachers. Aristotle's works were translated into Latin. Roman aristocrats read them. Cicero read them. The Roman Empire fell. The West plunged into darkness. Cities were sacked. Libraries burned. Knowledge vanished. But in the East, light survived. The Islamic Empire rose. In Baghdad, the House of Wisdom was founded. Caliphs commanded. Find Greek philosophy. Translate it. Scholars traveled to Athens, Alexandria, Syria. They found old manuscripts. They found Aristotle. They translated him into Arabic, studied him, annotated him. Avicenna read him. Averroes read him. And in the 12th century, Aristotle returned to Europe. Through the Crusades, through trade routes, through Toledo, Spain. Manuscripts preserved in the Islamic world were retranslated into Latin. Europe was stunned. This knowledge existed. This system. This logic. Universities emerged. Paris. Oxford. Bologna. What did they teach first? Aristotle. Thomas Aquinas merged him with Christian theology, called him the philosopher, with the definite article. No other explanation needed. The philosopher meant Aristotle. For 1,000 years of the Middle Ages, every university in Europe taught Aristotle. They thought with his logic, judged with his ethics, explained the world with his natural philosophy. Kings came and went. Empires rose and fell. Wars raged. Plague swept through. Revolutions erupted. But Aristotle remained. The dead giant broke free from his tomb and ruled the world again. For 2,000 years. And now, here. 2,400 years have passed. Over 2,300 years since Aristotle died. The world has completely changed. A world he couldn't have imagined. Machines fly through the sky. Tiny devices in our hands connect us to the globe. Humans have left footprints on the moon. His natural philosophy was wrong. Earth is not the center of the universe. Celestial bodies are not made of ether. The four-element theory has been discarded. But what he left behind wasn't just knowledge. What he left was an attitude, a method, a spirit. Observe, question, classify, understand. Every time you ask why, Aristotle stands beside you. When you observe phenomena and search for patterns, you are Aristotle's student. When you think logically and trace causes, you use the tools he created. He gives us courage. That a person without wealth, without power, without armies, can change the world with thought alone. That an eccentric collecting sea squirts on a beach can dominate 2,000 years. Alexander conquered the world, but the empire he built collapsed the moment he died. 10 years. Aristotle conquered nothing, but the empire of knowledge he built survived 2,400 years, and it still lives. Power vanished like dust. Gold rusted. Crowns were locked in museums. But one man's passionate questions remain like stars, still lighting our path today. When you want to learn something, when you want to understand the world, when you want to become a better person. The journey Aristotle began on the mudflats of Lesbos in the 4th century BC continues now in your room. The small lamp he lit 2,400 years ago still burns beside you. He died, but he lives inside you.